It's time to be woke, take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke, cause the wicked hide behind the cloak, and if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked, so listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't, is this the fog or smog, cause there's a difference when you breathe it in, so don't let the corporate media take you for a spin, this that morning show, they put you in the know, so I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, 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 yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. Thank you for joining us this morning. It is Wednesday, and we have a jam-packed show for you today, so we're going to get right into it. And I would like to introduce my lovely and talented co-host, Ms. Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Andy. How's things?
Hanging in there. We are still under attack by the evil gypsy moth caterpillars that are being bossy and inconsiderate of the fact that we own this house and they're trying to take it over from the outside in. And I called a place that, like an exterminator type place, but I was picky because I don't want to hurt our local ecosystem. And so there's a place here that uses just all, natural stuff and not like harmful chemicals. And we asked them late last week if they would come by, and they said, yeah, within the next 5 days, we'll send somebody. And, over this time, I'm looking at my backyard trees being slowly devoured and thinking, oh, please hurry and come. So they sent a guy out yesterday and he said, okay, I'll write you up a quote for what it's going to cost. And he handed me the quote and left. And the quote was for weed control for my lawn.
Oh, no. So he had no idea what he was there for. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
So apparently they're sending the tree guy tomorrow.
Okay, good. So at least it puts you on the right path. So
that's right. Yes, so we'll have an extra pallbearer for my trees at the funeral.
There you go. Well, good luck to you. I've been working in the desert, and for those of you who don't know what's going on, I will have some information coming out because this is part of a larger project. It's not just a personal issue, but a big project, and it is in the intersectionality of climate change and housing and homelessness and all of that. So what we're working on is a proof of concept. So what better proof of concept than to take a blind, disabled, middle-aged lady who is pale as shit and put her in the middle of the desert with very little resources, very, very few tools, and see if she can do this thing. And okay, so there's a lot of painkiller involved in it, but so far it's coming along nicely. So I'm getting ready to come out with all this information about what it is I'm doing, what I'm working on. And I think one of the side effects, I am so delighted. I have a tan now. I am taupe. So yay, first time ever.
I'm going to push back and ask the question, is there a color between translucent and taupe? Because I don't think you're quite taupe. You're taupe-like, maybe.
Eggshell. No, I'm going to go with taupe.
Okay,
SPF
that's fine.
100 on everything. So
I've decided that I'm going to order from Amazon and have it shipped to you a horse with no name.
There. Yeah, exactly. So when I get all that stuff together, so I can let people know what I'm working on. I want you to follow along with me in all of my foils and stuff like this, because what we're working on matters. And it matters not just for the local area here in New Mexico, but it would translate to everywhere in the country, particularly in the effects of climate change. And we just saw an article that came out like 2 or 3 days ago about the water crisis. The Colorado River is only at 37%. There is a catastrophic drought going on with California, Nevada, and Arizona. So those states are going to declare, if they haven't already, I didn't see it this morning, but they're going to just declare a water emergency. And that means that local farmers are going to get less, about 20 to 30% less of their water rights in those states, which means higher prices. They said right now homeowners may not see it, but of course golf courses aren't going to see the issue, but it's going to affect farmers. So the project that we're working on is with a number of other groups. So I hope to have that come out pretty soon, so that people can understand. I'm splitting my time now between Albuquerque and the middle of the desert up in the mountains, and it's chaos and chaotic, but thank you for your patience as we continue our show.
So Carrie, why haven't we heard about this water crisis in the desert?
Well, I think people who live in the western states are, if not already, are getting very familiar with the effects of climate change and water. The rest of the country that is also under a catastrophic drought, no, they're really not talking about it. So we're talking about Idaho, Wisconsin, Ohio, Iowa, Illinois, the breadbasket states. Though they're really not getting the information, and they are under the same kind of drought that we're under here in desert areas. So
but those areas aren't classified as desert. How can this be?
They will be. If we keep going, they will be. And this is where I want to do a bigger segment on climate change, because I feel like, and maybe it's just me, weigh in the comments, people don't believe in climate change. I think we're still under that impression, like children with their parents, if there was a threat, that they would be doing something. And well, honestly, they are. They're just not doing anything to benefit you, which is part of what I wanted to talk about this morning with our border crisis. And the headline that came out with Vice President Kamala Harris and her comments in Guatemala, where she was outright telling people, don't come, and people lost their shit. So I included a couple of links in the chat. So if you go out and take a look, here's some quick facts about her comments relative to the border crisis, right? She was in Guatemala. What's happening in Guatemala, not from a geopolitical perspective, but purely humanitarian, is you have the coyotes who have an entire industry around taking money from poor people and bringing them to the border. And they are trying desperately, it's, capitalism at its finest, trying desperately to market and say that the US border is open, come on in, give us your money and we'll take you there. So that is kind of off the chart. And I believe, I'm not going to speak for the VP or any of her folks, but I believe that's what she was speaking to in Guatemala. Here's the rub. The majority of people who are coming to the US borders as asylum seekers, they're not necessarily from Guatemala. Guatemala is a very small portion of the people that are arriving at the border. The majority are coming from Venezuela. We can't have that conversation from a US-centric perspective, because the US policy has created the situation in Venezuela to prompt these people to want to leave. So we're not going to talk about Venezuela at all and what we're doing to manipulate their elections, their economy, the fact that they're number one in our oil imports, all of those things we're not going to talk about. We're going to talk about Guatemala. And I think that's the deflection where people are outraged over her comments. They forget that, wait, it's not Guatemala, it's Venezuela. And then the other portion of this, I did an article for Real Progressives, I think it was a year and a half ago, talking about the border crisis. And one thing that I really want people to understand is this is the third administration to outsource all of the processing at the border to Mexico. And in May of this year, the Biden administration has just done it again to ramp up. So what we're doing is, you remember the black sites where we can't have black sites in the United States where we torture people. We send them overseas to an outsourced location in another country and pay them to do it for us, and we just oversee it. Well, the same thing is happening with our border crisis here. Vice President Kamala Harris personally met with Mexican leader Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and my accent is terrible, I apologize, but she met with him in May to outsource border detainment, to ramp it up. So we're paying them for that. Here is the problem with that. The Human Rights Watch has been talking about what's going on the Mexico side of the border on our behalf. All of these immigrants are being tortured. They're being manipulated. They're being murdered. They're being sold into sex slavery. All of these things, the worst that you could possibly imagine. And at best, the Mexican government is taking their paperwork, their documentation, their banking records, all of these things, taking it away from them, telling them that we need these things to process your immigration, to process your asylum. And so if you're coming in from Venezuela, how do you now get money from your family or people who are either in the United States or back in Venezuela? You can't. So now you're at the mercy of all of these people who are preying upon you and your family. So just a few facts here. The Trump administration, under its program called Remain in Mexico, sent more than 71,000 asylum seekers to Mexico to wait asylum hearings. Why is that important? Well, US law, when it comes to asylum seekers, what you need to do is go to the border, declare that you are an asylum seeker, and await a hearing. And then an immigration judge and lawyers get together and they hear your case and decide whether to grant you asylum. That's how the law works. These are people who are not crossing the border illegally. They're doing what we told them to do, asylum seekers. So we have been sending them back to Mexico for Mexico to deal with, and we've been paying for that. So since March of 2020, the US has expelled more immigrants. Additionally, since March 2020, the US has expelled more than 400,000 times as many to Mexico, including asylum seekers who are denied a chance to make their claims under travel restrictions, reportedly to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So this is a continuing policy in the Biden administration, who has ramped it up even more than the Trump administration. And then once again, we have Mexico on our behalf, who has been cited by Human Rights Watch because these Venezuelans in particular are facing kidnapping, extortion, and then lack of essential services, water, food, things like that. So all of that is going on right now at our border because we paid for it, we outsourced it. So, so if you were upset about the vice president's comments in Guatemala, I think you're missing the point. You're missing the bigger picture of what's going on in our immigration situation and all of these people. And then honestly, you know, Andy, you mentioned climate change, and we talked about that. It's only going to get worse, as the geopolitical situation becomes less stable. And, you know, the US imperialism starts to interfere even more in Venezuela and other countries because we don't like, you know, maybe the populist candidate who's running. We're going to prop up a dictator or somebody who's more neoliberal, austerity leaning, and we're going to make the situation worse. There's always a cause and effect. So, yeah, that's.
Yeah, and we've seen there's a couple of points to pull from that. And number one, from the climate change part, we're seeing you know, physically that the temperature around the equator in all regions of the earth at the center are becoming so hot that it's not able to support human life anymore, right? So people are fleeing those regions just to survive the heat and going either north or going south, right? And so that's something that isn't controlled by anyone, right? You don't have a choice, right? You made your bed by being nasty to the climate, and now people are trying to survive just to leave those areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we've got, but even without talking about climate change, the policy of the U.S. government has always been about putting their own U.S. centric friendly leader in charge of these countries and these regime change coups that happen. And what happens is it destabilizes these countries and it allows crime to run rampant. And then the people, in order to survive, have to flee. This is all a U.S. problem, right? These are all created by the American military regime change paradigm that the U.S. has done for centuries or for decades, right? So we've got no one to blame, but U.S. has no one to blame but itself for all
Right.
of this, right? And then we try to figure out what's going on in Venezuela, and of course the mainstream media narrative, oh, it's socialism. That's the problem there, right? Of course it is. Yeah, it's nothing to do with the U.S. and the fact that they're the most oil-rich country in the planet. But yeah, we'll believe that it's socialism. So we've gone from a Trump administration that said, we don't want people across here. We're going to either put them in cages or deport them or not let them in because they're not the right color and we don't like them, to the Biden administration, which is doing the same thing for basically the same reason, but we're going to say it's because we want to protect you and we don't think it's safe for you to come.
Exactly. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, we are live and interactive. So shout out this morning to Holly Horn, who's watching us on KRTD Media. Good morning. And she's weighing in with some heavy points here. So Holly, thank you. She says, Harris is an arrogant hypocrite and reminds us that 200 plus Haitians were deported on Biden's first day. And then she also brings up sanctions. This is something that we're absolutely famous for. So thank you, Holly, for joining in on that part. But yeah, I did not know about the 200 plus Haitians. We don't like brown and black people, apparently.
That may have been ordered by Hillary.
Yeah, it could be. Well, this is the same administration that had a VP who is openly admitted smoking marijuana and then fired staffers, low-level staffers, for having done the same, 10 years ago. So yeah, this is kind of what we expect. And for those of you who are tuning in who happen to be blue MAGA and you're screaming now, well, what about Trump? Okay, I just had a conversation with Tony Poznansky, big following on Twitter, who was doing the exact same thing, the whataboutism. I've had enough of that under Trump. I don't want to see it from the blue MAGA team either. Morals and ethics are not mutable depending on who's in office. They are what they are. And if you choose to play the whataboutism and think that, well, this person stole from me, so I can steal from, no, you are doing the exact same thing. And you are the reason we now live in what's categorized as a failed democracy. So congratulations on that. I would invite you to continue watching our program so that we can help you get out of that mindset and get back to reality. Because I'm personally really tired of seeing all of the blue MAGA, red MAGA. Well, we've got some really big issues to deal with. So with that, let's get into electoral politics and what's going on. So to continue just a touch on the blue MAGA, red MAGA thing, HR 1 just passed the House, and people are flipping their shit because Joe Manchin in the Senate has decided he's going to vote against it. And for those who are not familiar with how this works, if you have a bill that passes the House, it must also pass the Senate before it can go to the president's desk to be signed into law. It works the same way at the state level. Here it is at the federal level. So HR 1 is being touted by the Democratic Party as a savior of voting rights. It is not. I am so sorry to tell you that. If you haven't read HR 1, you can go and do that right now. It's at congress.gov, type in HR 1, and the text of the bill will come up. When you see what this bill actually does, it's pretty much performative bullshit. There's this really interesting program about sending money to schools to get sample ballots to junior high and high school students, which I guess is good. But the majority of it does not protect ballot access and voting rights the way that they are selling it. And, it's rare that I would say this, but kudos to Joe Manchin for saying no on this one, because it also marginalizes ulterior parties. What this bill does is protects the monetary pipeline so that, and we showed you this in our program just the other day, and go back and watch it, how the corporate interests groom their candidates to run for office and shut out other candidates so that they can keep everything going the way they want it to go. And HR 1 further solidifies this because it shuts out third party or alternative candidates and parties, does not protect ballot access, and keeps the money flowing just for the two corporate entities, RNC and DNC. So if you haven't read HR 1, there are some good things in it. I'll take that, some good things, but I would like to see those split out into separate bills rather than putting it all together in this craptacular performative bullshit. And if once again you're screaming at me for this, I would invite you to look into how elections are actually run. They're run at a state level, not at a federal level. And if you're saying, but what about these laws? Go and take a look at what Democrats in the Texas House are doing. They are fighting the good fight. They walked out and would not allow the disruptive from the Republicans in Texas to pass. That is what you want to see. If you're concerned about voting rights and how things work at a state level, it's at the state level. What Democrats in Congress are trying to do is shut out competition. And that's not democratic at all. And it's not even free market capitalism. So I'm not sure what they're trying to do with HR 1. But yeah, Holly, so mixed bag, absolutely mixed bag. So that's kind of where we are with HR 1. So there were a couple of elections that happened over the last about a week and a half that you might want to consider getting a little more familiar with. So we'll start with Virginia. Now, this was a primary election, gubernatorial election for Democrats. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind, you put up this first graphic because it cracked me up. So shout out to Ricardo, who tweeted this out. I thought it was hilarious. Ricardo says Pete Buttigieg has claimed victory in Virginia's Democratic primary for governor. I thought that was hilarious because it was a good shout out to the Iowa primary, where Buttigieg had obviously manipulated things like crazy and decided that he was going to declare victory in that particular primary. So thank you, Ricardo. That was hilariously funny. But
and if anybody deserves a victory like this, it's Pete Buttigieg.
right, exactly. So I appreciated the humor there. So this is how this particular primary went down. And one thing that I did not know this, and I don't know, I wish I had known, but one of the people that was running in this primary was Lee Carter. If you're a Bernie-crat and you don't know Lee Carter, shame on you, because Lee Carter came in, he swept out an incumbent Republican under the Bernie blue wave in 2018. So he represents, I believe it's Virginia's 50th district. And it has been doing a decent job at it. No complaints. He's voting exactly where he said he was voting, representing people, not necessarily corporations, which probably doesn't make him a darling of the Virginia Democratic Party, but he's doing his damn thing. And he was running for governor. Didn't really make a good showing. So I'm not sure what happened here. It may have been too crowded of a field. He couldn't get the money. And in our political system, you got to have the money for advertising, marketing, outreach, things like that. Yeah. So
he's also tied up in Pete Buttigieg's basement.
It could be. Yeah. Something happened there where, Lee, thank you for running, but just could not get the momentum. He was not dead last, but he was pretty low down on there. So the gentleman who did win, actually, he has an interesting history. If you don't know Terry McAuliffe, he was governor before, and he also was head of the DNC, Democratic National Committee, from 2001 to 2005. He was, and here's where his resume gets really juicy. He was co-chair of President Bill Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign. And then he was chair of Hillary's 2008 presidential campaign. So this guy has been with the Hillary camp and DNC embeds for a very long time. One thing that I thought was interesting that killed his last election bid, re-election for governor, he was still sitting governor of Virginia when the FBI announced that they were investigating him. Initially, CNN said it was for a donation that was made to him by a Chinese national, and then they walked that back. What was actually happening is he was being investigated as an unregistered lobbyist. So if you are going to act as a lobbyist for a cause, or a corporation or a particular bill, you have to register and let people know up front. It's kind of like your NASCAR badge. But he was advocating for laws and policies at the same time he was taking money from these same Chinese nationals. So that's what he was being investigated for. And I could not find anything related to that investigation. What happened? It seemed like no charges were brought. Couldn't find anything like that, just that he was not indicted. But, as an aside, that was one of the things where Trump put out a tweet, one of his obscure arcane tweets that didn't really tell you detail, that said that the investigation was squashed. So squash could mean we didn't find any evidence to indict, we didn't find enough evidence, whatever it was, but he ran again and he was just elected as governor. So yay for neoliberalism. I will say this, he's good.
Boy.
Yeah, he's good on LGBT issues. So I guess that's a win. But yeah, so okay, so there you go. Now you have another, we've shored up the legs of the DNC good old boy network in Virginia. So there you go. Yeah, so
Whoopee.
Contain your enthusiasm, Andy. Oh my goodness. It's more of the same, please. So yeah, so that happened. Oh hey, Oz is back. And Holly says Clintonite. And Oz says the establishment has rigged these elections. Electoral politics will not change the corruption as it is today. Well, that's kind of what we've been talking about. We brought up the example of Putin and his cronies in Russia and made the same comparison here in the US, which is why I am railing against HR 1, particularly with, the Democrat sycophants who are, we got to pass HR 1. None of them read it. None of them understand how elections actually work, where the issues are, and that it's ballot access. You can't claim to be a champion for voting rights and elections while you yourself are engaged in suppressing choice, free thought, primaries, things like that. So yeah, absolutely agree. So,
Hey, Oz, don't try to steal my grumpy thunder, though, please.
right,
And
right.
the other thing is, Carrie, I love that you got to use the word sycophant.
It's a good word. It's a 10-cent word.
Well, I always, whenever I hear it, it's one of those words that makes me giggle because I think of an unwell elephant.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, we should start doing that and challenging ourselves. Give us a 10-cent word and we'll work it into an episode. I think it would be
That would be
great.
very perspicacious.
Oh, okay. Good on you, Andy. Awesome. Awesome. And on that note, let's move on to Peru. So Peru, this was a big one because we're still delving into what's going on with voting there, but this one is such a tight race, such a tight race. And you almost wonder why, what's going on. It's unusual to have a race this tight. So it's down to 0.4% for Pedro. Pedro is they call him the hard left. No, he's a populist. He's a populist. So
Yeah, he's a rural guy that has done a lot of he's a union guy. He's head of have been involved with unions most of his adult career, and he's taken that to the the socialist stance as to this election, and realized that Peru was under, for lack of a better term, a dictator with his opponent's father, who was ousted in disgrace, right?
Yeah. Who's in jail right now?
Oh yeah. And it's an interesting, when you look at this the whole thing, and the shout out to Fiorella from Convo Couch, because she's been really keeping a close eye on this and posting it on Twitter, which is where I've got most of my information as I followed this, because it's like the Peruvian government got the history of the 2020 American election, and they're using it as a template, right? You've got this very powerful conservative family that is going to be, trying to say, we are the lesser of two evils, right? The socialist other guy will destroy our country. We can't do that. We have to toe the line on fiscal conservatism, and of course the media is weighing in on that, and the centrist apologists are also writing pieces as editorials and placing them in there, and the people in the country are like, no, screw it, we're done with you people. We're going to. So when you look at the map and where most of the support is coming from, there are a number of people in Peru that are saying these numbers shouldn't be this close, because outside of the city of Lima, the vast majority of people are very much in favor of the socialist guy. We're going to question this, because this doesn't make any sense, right? That we're looking at these numbers, it shouldn't be this way. Because I think that with 97% of the votes tabulated, that Pedro has, I think it's a 0.3 or 0.4 percentage lead, and it shouldn't be that close. So we've also seen, and Fiorella again has reported on this, that there were people that were going to the polls they were getting their ballots, they were bringing them in to use them, and they already had pre-selected uh, uh, Kiko on the conservative person on this one. So there's this going on, and now we're seeing in the media that she is claiming that there's voting fraud, widestream voting fraud, and why she's not winning. And gee, doesn't that sound familiar? Where have I heard that narrative before, Carrie?
Well, two places, Hillary and Trump. They both said it. So yeah, that seems to be the playbook, the neo-lib playbook.
Yes, America's #1 export.
And I hate that is the case. We are like the bad influence for others. Like, oh, it worked there, let's try it here. And that's kind of what we're seeing. So Oz says Pedro for the people and Kiko for corruption. And he says, yes, Fiorella is fantastic. And thank you, Andy, for saying that. And he also recommends Medea Benjamin as well as a good resource for people who want to know more about what's actually going on there. And yeah, so tune in, because this I think is really interesting. And you're right, statistically, it shouldn't be this close. And this is where you have the international observers who were pushing back on Kiko. And even people in her own party were like, yeah, let's not go that route, because the international observers said the election was fine. What they're doing is going into each of these precincts to see what actually happened, to follow up on some of those allegations that the ballots were pre-selected, which you cannot do.
Yes, and there's also allegedly there's also stories of especially seniors that have been paid to say that there's corruption, right? They've been paid by Kiko's camp to say that there's corruption. This is allegedly, nothing's been proved, but this is another story that's surfaced. Right?
Well, it reminds me of what happened it's another U.S. export, because in the Georgia Democratic Party used that exact same thing in a criminal complaint against Joseph Trina, the Bernie Krat organizer. This guy had been decorated within the Democratic Party for voter outreach and all of these things. And the minute Bernie started to rise and Joseph became a Bernie supporter, then the Democratic Party turned on him and used a 92-year-old woman who Joseph had worked with to put in, what was it, harassment charges? Harassments or some sort of threat, and actually took him to court and would not allow him to come back to the Democratic Party meeting. And Joseph has since passed away, so he will never have justice or be exonerated. So way to go, Georgia Democrats on that one. But it's the exact same thing. And the reason they use these tactics is because they work, right? Until we all get hip to it and we all go, yeah, no, it's not, and start pushing back. That is part of that, the positive piece of cancel culture. Until we start pushing back on those types of bullshit tactics, we are never going to have a true democratic process, as evidenced in Peru. So,
right, and the only reason that that's a viable means is because of the mainstream media's complicity in all of this, right? That they're controlling that narrative, and people will not necessarily, unless they're listening to advocates like ourselves on social media. But the vast majority of Americans still get their, especially the older quote unquote voting crowd, still get their narrative from mainstream media. That's not going to change, right? They're running cover. And the perfect example is the Florida Democratic primary between Biden and Bernie, and they asked Floridians, who they thought would be better on free healthcare, and overwhelmingly they said Biden.
Yeah. Mm.
So there's that.
There's that. Government, keep your hands off my Medicare. Yeah, so we've got a long way to go for basic civics and monetary policy education. So there's one more special election that I wanted to get to, and this happened here in New Mexico. So for those who have not been keeping score, the House member from not Illinois, New Mexico, Freudian, Deb Haaland was picked up by the Biden administration to become Secretary of the Interior, which is a great thing. So far, she's doing a good listening tour. We're looking for policy development, shutting down fracking, returning, upholding Article 6 for Indigenous people. Article 6 of the Constitution, for those of you who don't know, is the U.S. will honor all treaty agreements with sovereign nations, including Indigenous tribes. So that's what I'm looking for from Deb Haaland. She was my congresswoman, and so we had to replace her. So they just had a special election, and this was open to any party. So you had a number of different folks running. The favorite, and I don't necessarily want to call her anointed, but kind of looks like it. She had the backing of the majority of Democrats and those on the left. Excuse me, and she was just elected. Her name is Melanie Stansbury. And the reason why I wanted to highlight this is not just because it's a little bit of a civic lesson here about how things work, but because look at her resume. And if you wonder where some of the anointed candidates come from, it's because they have a long history of working with the party, their established party, and they have a relationship. So you can take it one of two ways. One, it's always an insider, and it's always the insider who's going to get picked and is the darling. While that's true, the other way to look at this is possibly it's you keep it in the family, right? So I had this challenge in Illinois with unions. To get into the union or get into the apprenticeship program, first question they ask you is, are you a union member? Because they want to keep it in the family. Same thing happens with politics. So here you have a person who has served the Democratic Party, served the Obama administration, served on different committees, was a staff member for a Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, and an aide to Senator Maria Cantwell. So she has a long relationship and they feel comfortable. I feel good that this person's not going to flip their shit and they're not, just some crazy person. So I feel comfortable making the endorsement and getting them into office. So she was currently serving as a state House member and now has been elected to Congress. So I think that this is important to kind of get a better understanding of how these things develop. And good, bad, or indifferent, here are the facts of it, and here's a candidate who shows that. And I don't want to suggest that she herself is a bad person or that she's not going to do a job. It's just, I think her resume tells the story that we need to understand better when we talk about checking out of politics and all of these other things. So, hey, Oz, Reef did not build the graphics for today. Do you have a critique or suggestion? Because, no, we are totally self-contained on Hair of the Dog. We do not get graphic support or anything else from any of our syndicated networks. So let us know.
We are self-contained.
Yes. Self-rescuing princesses here on Hair of the Dog. Oh, he says, no, they look good. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So that was the last one that I wanted to go through on this really quick election recap, just to give you basic civics and understanding, particularly for those of you who have checked out of electoral politics, because it matters. It still matters. You may have checked out, but that means you're just giving them power to own you just a little bit more, and we don't want that.
And it's a very interesting dynamic that you see, right? That this narrates, because we see that the DNC has their own support structure that promotes from within, and once you've shown that you are worthy of being there and being supportive. And those things include towing the party line, not suggesting any changes that would cost the donor class any money, and in fact, being good at raising money from within, and you support the upper echelon, then the sense of entitlement that gets you to the top in your turn because you've done your due diligence, just promotes from within. And that's what we've seen with the DNC, and that won't change. And as long as they are in charge of who the candidate is going to be federally, then looking to the Democratic Party for the quote unquote change for the just society that America needs, that's not ever where it's going to happen, as long as that party maintains their stranglehold on the DNC, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we've seen that over and over again.
And they have literally said, where else are you going to go? And this is why I rail against HR 1, because it does nothing to protect democracy or to expand the conversation on policy.
Exactly.
You have to have multiple parties and coalitions and things like that in order for that to happen. So while on one hand, they're strangling out those opportunities, they're still calling it voting rights, and it's not. It's absolute bullshit. So, Okay, we just got an invitation to a dance. This is nice. Oz asked if we're up to joining him on his show to promote yours. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah.
As long as it's not in person, because, the border.
Yeah, poor Andy. You're still stuck. You're stuck. But yeah, right. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So that wraps up our electoral piece. There are two events that I definitely wanted to highlight here, and I have been negligent on one of these. The other one just got announced. So, Andy, which one do you want to do first?
Let's talk about our buddy Rome first.
Okay. So for those of you who are not aware, Rome Bethia is a badass doing what he does. He is a outright communist. I don't know where you fall on the political spectrum, but he's all about the people movement, and he's fully embraced communists, as a lot of younger folks have. They're, Andy, you and I have talked about it. They are not terrified of the word communism the way that we were raised. So I find that curious, and kind of I'm pleased by it, because I want to have those conversations, right? I have no problem talking to a libertarian or a Trumper or even a neoliberal cafe latte Becky. So because I'm confident in my understanding of politics and policy and cause and effect. So I want to have more of those conversations with outright socialists, democratic socialists, not the democratic socialists who are sheepdogging for the Democratic Party, actual democratic socialists, and others, because we need those. We need those conversations.
Absolutely. Of course we do.
So here is Rome living what he says he believes in, and he's doing this nationwide tour. He's been to 3 or 4 states. And here he is prepping to go to Seattle. So not just Seattle, but Everett. So 2 places in Washington on July 4th. And I like the way he said it. He's like, if our government has failed us on July 4th, it's up to us, people power. That's why I'm doing this on July 4th. So what he does is collects monetary donations. And it's not a lot. He's turning a dime into a dollar. He's phenomenal with this. And he collects toiletries, diapers, food, clothing, all of this sort of thing, and hands it out to people in need. He doesn't ask, what your income is. None of that. His core goal is to let people know that they actually matter, that they matter to each other. They should matter to everyone. And then for those of you who can't tell, and I don't want to be indecent, but so I am wearing his brand new design shirt. It's called Eat the Rich, and it's super cute. Absolutely super cute. He designed this himself. I purchased one of these shirts, and I'll put the link in here. So if you want to support Rome and you can't be on the ground in Washington, if you can't be there with him to help hand out everything that's going on. This is one way where you get something, you get this cute little t-shirt, and he gets the proceeds and he's spending them on these donations and these goodwill efforts. So shout out to Moon. He's always walking the talk, and I appreciate it.
Yes, and help donate to Rome and get him the hell down from there.
Yeah, that's it. Poor guy stuck up on the needle. So this other event, and this one I was so geeked. This is Medicare for All rallies and marches. And shout out to Savage Joy who hit me to this one, because reason I got excited is Albuquerque's on the list. So I actually get to participate in a nationwide event here in my city. So I was so excited. And I've got the link to this one. It is a Linktree March for Medicare for All. So what's happening with this one, this is later in the month of July. They're doing a huge rally in DC, and I believe Savage is going to speak at that one, as well as a number of other people. But the rest of the cities around the country are in solidarity with that, happening at the same time. Everybody, just around the country. And I gotta tell you, it sounds contrite. It sounds, this is how we make some change here, because we've got the momentum building, and we can have conversations face to face on the street. So if I run into somebody in Albuquerque who's like, it's socialism, I get to be out there and explain to them, no, it's not socialism. It's just basic regulation. Basic regulation. Socialism would be completely different. What we're asking for is basic regulation, and get the for-profit insurance companies out of the mix, their death panels and their overhead and all of that other sort of thing. So your hospitals, your doctors, all of these people get direct pay, and we all take care of each other. So I get to have that conversation on the street and maybe plant the seed. I have zero expectation that I'm going to flip somebody in that moment. Plant the seed and have them start thinking about it and maybe find some more information. And once we convince, all I have to do is convince one person, and the person next to me convince one person. And that's how it grows. And we've been fighting this fight for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. And just getting out there and showing in the US, in all of these cities, the mainstream media can't ignore that. If we get a huge amount of people out to participate in these things, right? Excuse me, to talk in person about it, to understand that going into medical bankruptcy is a common thing, and it's not partisan. It doesn't affect one political ideology over another. It's Americans that suffer from this, and to come to an understanding that Americans need to demand what every other major country in the world already has.
Yeah.
Right? That the US is by itself, it spends twice as much on healthcare for a system that doesn't help the most vulnerable in society. It's when you understand how other systems in the world work and what the US is going through, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And it doesn't have to be this way. And it doesn't need to be the majority of people in the country that go out and protest. It just has to be enough to get people's attention and to get congressmen and women and senators' attention that this is a problem. That's how you make change.
Absolutely. And it always starts from the bottom up. So here are the list of cities where these events are being organized right now. And it's a long list, but it's Albuquerque, Asheville, Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, Detroit, Honolulu, Irvine, Los Angeles, Louisville, I'm going to say it right, Louisville, New York City, Orlando, Phoenix, Portland, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, Tampa, Washington, D.C. And then here's the really nice part. If your city is not mentioned, you can start your own and they will help you. And this is where I was telling Savage, this is a phenomenal effort because they already have the graphics, they already have the collateral, they already have the organizing tools, they have everything that you would need to get this started in your city. So if your city is not currently on the list, you can put this together pretty quickly. And if nothing else, it's a good way to get together in solidarity with other people, do so safely. But it's a good way to have that visibility. And as we've seen from US politics, performance matters, perception matters. And we can't help that we have been so conditioned to that kind of reflex action. But here is you using those same tools that the propagandists use, but doing it for a positive, something that helps all of us. So I posted that link yet again, or go out to Savage Joy's Twitter feed. She's got information on it. Sign up, get involved. This is something that we can do for not just yourself, your family, your community. Like I said, I live in New Mexico, and we have absolutely just about every piece of progressive legislation has gone into law here, with the exception of Medicare for all. If I get Medicare for all, I mean, I don't mean to brag, but I'm in utopia. So let's make it happen.
Well, and that should be the case for every American, right? It's absolutely ludicrous that it isn't. And I actually wanted to give an extra little shout out to volunteers at RP that are at Real Progressives that are also involved in this, specifically Eric Kestner of the Yellow Vests. They are running some of the other cities that are doing this. We are trying to spread the MMT narrative that shows how to properly fund this from the federal level, and basically just give let everybody know that this is something that we all want, right? And how do we get there? Because there's a lot of push right now for state-based Medicare for all, right? And trying to help people understand that, sure, it's important that those things perhaps move forward in at least a show of solidarity. We want them. But if you're an advocate for MMT, you understand federal financing, that's ultimately where the money needs to come from, right? That it's not just states that can afford this, and certainly not all 50 states. I would say just a handful of them may be able to do this, but ultimately the funding has to be backed by the federal government. And everybody coming out to these cities and joining hands and speaking with a single voice saying, we want it, goes a long way to convincing the federal government that, yeah, if you want to stay in power, then you have to start implementing progressive policies, because the United States is going to self-destruct if it doesn't, because the nth stage capitalist society that you live in is eating itself. And it's going to be a matter of survival.
Right.
That's why this is so important.
And I think one of my favorites is, like, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about, it's socialism. We need to push back on all of that and say, well, it's not socialism when you are getting your platinum level insurance and benefits for your family paid for in the same way that we are asking for our coverage to be paid for.
Yes, exactly. And that's very important. And one other thing I would like to little quick side note about this is that because I'm Canadian and we have free healthcare in this country, right? That initiative was started in the province of Saskatchewan, which is a Midwest province. And at the time they had a socialist government. They initiated healthcare for all at the provincial level, which is like the US starting at the state level, right? But the reason that it survived and went nationally is because at the time it was needed and wanted by the majority of Canadians, and the federal government was on board with bringing it in. And so they ended up taking the initiative from the province of Saskatchewan and backstopping it with the Canadian dollar from the federal government. And that's why it succeeded, right? That's an important thing. If the people that are trying to get the state run Medicare for all systems say, we want it, we need it, we're not going to support a federal government that doesn't bring it in. That's the message, right?
Yeah.
That's if that gets the ball rolling, then that gets the ball rolling.
Right. And I'm all for the opposite push too. Like, so I would say to Marjorie's and, you know, all the people on Democratic Party who are like, no, let's not do that. Then I would take the opposite approach and say, okay, we agree with you. No socialism even for you. And let's put in a bill to remove your coverage, your benefit for even the clinic that sits in Congress. We want that removed. We want your insurance benefits removed. We want all of it removed. Not that it would hurt them, because most people who sit in Congress are millionaires. They don't give a shit. But what it would do is educate the rest of Americans going, wait a second, we were paying for that? At a federal level, then it would, I think, pull off that conversation about how we actually pay for things in a way that we aren't able to get to, because you have too many people who still believe this great lie of austerity and that the deficit is debt. So I don't know. That's my take. But
well, and I agree with that. The point, you know, it's socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor, right? Ultimately, all people need to do is stand up with a coherent voice, a single voice, and say, we want it. If you don't bring it in, you know, you don't get elected in. And that's ultimately how you change. Grassroots movements change policy. Electoral politics doesn't. Electoral politics reacts to grassroots movements. That's how you make change. And this is a good step forward.
Yep, absolutely. So we are way out of time here. We're way over, so it's okay. It's Wednesday. So thank you to everyone who joined in this morning. And I do want to put out a teaser for this really good show we got coming on Friday. It's going to be super funky. And I want you to make sure that you're in on this conversation because it's a big one. But Andy, before we go, do you want to tease some of our big news that's coming out?
Well, there's been a development as far as the Hair of the Dog show is concerned. We're in talks and looking at being picked up by an iHeart radio station. And Carrie, what's the name again?
Yeah, this is the House of Public Discourse. It's an up and coming station on iHeart Radio, and they're doing some amazing things about public discourse, about really getting into that critical thinking and having those better conversations, not just the bullshit opinion things, but some actual good conversations, good old-fashioned journalism, all of that sort of thing. So we were delighted that they looked at our show and went, yeah, you fit. You absolutely fit. You're doing something completely different than what we see across the internets, and they really like our broadcast. So it's exciting stuff. So
yeah, look for that coming up soon. And it expands our footprint, and it's great news for us. And so, kudos to them for their obvious good taste and intelligence.
Right, exactly. Nice. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you back here Friday. I'm telling you, you are not going to want to miss this conversation on Friday. We're going in a completely different direction. We're going to go entertainment, culture, and music. And I am just, oh, I cannot wait for this. So make sure that you tune in on Friday or bookmark it if you can't be here with us on Friday live to join the conversation and to weigh in with this. We got a stellar guest coming. If you're not able to bookmark it, because you're going to want to see this and you're going to want to keep up with some of these projects that we're going to discuss and things that are coming down the pike, because it's just phenomenal. We're going to have exclusive, unpublished, first time heard content on our show. So,
and it's going to be off the charts funky.
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody.
All right, everyone. Thank you, Carrie. Another amazing job of reporting, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, everyone. We will see you here bright and early on Friday morning. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Habit the dog. We keep it in G.